Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Jacksonville Jaguars at the New York Jets in their Week 9 matchup played November 8th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis for this game. So starting off in this game, the Jets got the ball first. They went 3 and out, and the Jaguars would then end up with a field goal on their first possession of the game as Jason Myers hit a 45-yard field goal to make it 3-0 Jacksonville over New York. Then on the next possession, the Jets, their second possession of the game, they would end up with a 7-yard touchdown pass from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Eric Decker. Quickly kicked the extra point, and it was 7-3 as the Jets took the lead. Fitzpatrick playing through the injury. And so now on the next possession for the Jaguars, Blake Bortles would be intercepted by Marcus Williams. And so now the Jets would take over on the Jacksonville 32, and they would end up with a 1-yard touchdown run by Chris Ivory with less than a minute left in the first quarter that made it 14-3 after the extra point by Quigley. So the Jets were up early. Then in the second quarter, these two teams were just trading punts back and forth, but with less than half a minute left before halftime, Blake Bortles hit Allen Hurns for a 30-yard touchdown. Jason Myers added the extra point, and it was now a 4-point game with the Jets up 14-10. So that was it for the first half. Then in the second half, both teams punted on their first possessions, and then the Jaguars on their second possession of the second half, with about 4.5 minutes left in the third quarter, would get a 39-yard field goal from Jason Myers that made it a 1-point game with the score New York 14, Jacksonville 13. But the Jets would respond with a 73-yard drive, 8 plays in about 2.5 minutes, capped off by another 1-yard touchdown run by Chris Ivory. Quigley added the extra point, and it was now an 8-point lead for the Jets, 21-13. So now Jackson will go 3 and out on their next possession, as would the Jets. And so then the Jaguars would take over after the punt with about 13 minutes left in this game on their own 10-yard line. And they would drive down the field all the way into the red zone, but the drive stalled at the New York 17-yard line. And after 3 incomplete passes, out came Jason Myers to attempt a 35-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was a 5-point game now with the Jets up 21-16. The Jets would punt on their next possession, and the Jags got the ball back with less than 8 minutes left, trailing by 5, and on their own 10-yard line. And they would end up getting down into New York territory, mainly off of a 45-yard run by T.J. Yeldon. They also had a 27-yard pass before that from Bortles to Lewis, but Yeldon's 45-yard run would set up the Jags on the New York 10-yard line in the red zone. But then Blake Bortles scrambled for 6, but it got called back because of holding. So now they're on the 21st and goal at the Jets 20. Bortles is sacked by Calvin Pace. He forces the fumble and recovered it. And so now the Jets would take over on their own 34, just as it looked like the Jags might have took the lead or at least put a couple points on the board with a field goal, but instead they end up with 0 due to the fumble. But the Jets would end up having to kick the ball as they would go 3 and out on this possession. They got a false start on the first play, and then after a run for no gain, and then they picked up 11, but they needed 15. That set up 3rd and 4, and another incomplete pass would bring out the punting unit. But on the punt, the Jaguars ended up fumbling, and the Jets recovered. So the Jets got the ball right back after going 3 and out. And so now they would have the ball on the Jacksonville 25, and they would end up with a 20-yard touchdown by Brandon Marshall as he caught the ball from Ryan Fitzpatrick, and now it was 28-16 with the extra point by Quigley with less than 3 minutes left to play. But Jacksonville wasn't going out that easy, as they would strike right back 3 plays later as Blake Bortles hit Brian Walters for a 20-yard touchdown, and this had been set up by a 31-yard return on the kickoff that put him on the 28, and then a big pass to Robinson, who picked up 23 yards that brought to midfield, and then a pass to Hearns for 29 yards that brought them to the 20 before that touchdown by Walters. And the extra point by Myers made it a 5-point game with the score New York 28, Jacksonville 23. So now New York would have the ball up by 5 with just over 2 minutes left to play in this game. They brought the clock down to the 2-minute warning, but they would end up having to punt the ball as they would go 3 and out on this next possession. So they punted the ball back to Jacksonville, who now took over with less than a minute left to play, down by 5. And they needed to go 92 yards to win this game as they were on their own 8-yard line. But on the first play of this possession, Marcus Williams comes up with his second interception of the game. He picks off Blake Bortles, and that would seal the deal, as all that was left to do was for Ryan Fitzpatrick to take 2 knees in the victory formation as the Jets hold on to win this one 28-23, as the Jaguars really shot themselves in the foot. They made a lot of mistakes, as the Jaguars ended up turning the ball over 4 times in this game. The Jets did not turn it over, although they were making mistakes as well. But Jacksonville just made more mistakes. But the Jets capitalize, and they come up with the big plays when they needed them the most. And even despite Bortles throwing for nearly 400 yards, the Jets improved to 5-3, and Jacksonville's now 2-6 after the loss. And the Jets they've only lost 1 game at home. They're 3-1 at home, and the Jaguars have not won a game on the road. They're 0-4 on the road. And in this one, the injured Ryan Fitzpatrick toughened it out. He was 21 for 34, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Chris Ivory was held to just 26 yards off of 23 carries, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He also had 3 receptions for 22 yards, which gave him a total of 48 yards on the game. Eric Decker had 6 receptions for 79 yards and a touchdown. And Brandon Marshall had 4 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown as well. And for the Jaguars, Blake Bortles, 24 for 40, 381 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He also had 4 carries for 32 yards. And TJ Yeldon, 14 carries for 64 yards. Of course, the majority of that coming on that 45-yard run. And then Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson, both over $120. Hurns, 5 receptions for 122 yards and a touchdowns. Robinson, 6 receptions for 121 yards. And Walters, 5 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. For the kickers, Quigley, 4 for 4 for the Jets on extra points. And for the Jaguars, Myers, 3 for 3 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points, as both kickers were perfect in the game. And on defense, the New York Jets had 6 sacks in this game, as Malden was mauling Bortles. He had 2 sacks in this game. Calvin Pace had a sack, also a forced fumble. And Williams had a half sack. He had the 2 interceptions as he came up clutch in this game. Richardson had a half a sack, and Bailey had a half a sack as well, and Williams did too. And for the Jaguars, Smith had a forced fumble, Clemens had a sack, and Odrick had a sack as well. We look at the team stats. The Jags had 19 first downs. The Jets had 14 on third down. The Jags were 7 of 16, 43% converted. And the Jets were 5 of 15, 33%. They went for it once on fourth down, and they did convert. And total net yards, 436 for Jacksonville, 290 for New York. On the ground, the Jaguars netted 98, just 29 rushing yards netted for the Jets. And in the air, 338 netted for Jacksonville. Bortles sacked 6 times, losing 43 yards. 261 netted for New York. Fitzpatrick sacked twice, losing 11 total yards. Look at the penalties. 6 penalties against the Jets, 41 yards penalized. 4 penalties against the Jaguars for 30 penalty yards. The Jags had 3 fumbles. They lost 2 of them. So they had the 2 lost fumbles and the 2 interceptions, which resulted in 4 turnovers in this game. Although the turnovers only ended up resulting in 7 points for the Jets. but they also stopped the Jags from scoring at moments when it looked like they might have took the lead and even the game. But in the red zone, that was really where the Jets were productive. They were perfect in the red zone, 3 for 3, 100%. And the Jaguars were 0%, 0 for 2 in the red zone. And that really was the big difference in this game, was the production and lack of production on the other side in the red zone, as the Jets came up big down there where it counted the most. When they were on the verge of scoring, they got it in there, whereas Jacksonville could not score in the red zone. And the time of possession was pretty close, 30 minutes and 44 seconds for New York, 29 minutes and 16 seconds for Jacksonville. So it was really more that Jacksonville kind of lost this game more than New York won the game, but a win is a win. And the Jets, they were opportunistic. They came up big. Of course, that fumble on the punt allowed them to get that touchdown to extend their lead to 12. Of course, Jacksonville would come back and score another touchdown to make it a 5-point game, but then Williams getting his second pick of the game to secure the win. And of course, the pick earlier led to that Chris Ivory touchdown that put him up 14-3. So the interception that he got that led to a touchdown earlier, and then he gets the interception at the end of the game to stop Jacksonville. Of course, there was only a minute left, and they were backed up on their own end zone there. But even still, that closed the deal. And the Jets, they made the plays that they had to make. It was an ugly win, but it was a win nonetheless. And they're 5-3 on the season with the win. And that's pretty big for the Jets at 5-3. Second place in the AFC East, especially with Buffalo winning today. That keeps them a game ahead of the Bills, who they will be facing on Thursday Night Football in just 4 short days. So that'll definitely be one to watch. But as for this one, Jacksonville, they continue to make those costly mistakes with the game in the balance, as they did have a chance to win this one. They've got a lot of talent, but just not so much discipline, and those turnovers bear that out. Of course, the Jets do have a good defense, but Bortles still, he put up some pretty big numbers, but they were able to contain the running game pretty well, other than that 45-yard run by Yeldon. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great weekend and enjoyed all the sports.